All right. Oh, there we go. Let's get started-ish. Wait for Twitch to catch up. Alright, hang on. Twitch had logged me out, so I'm not getting any updates, but I think we're good. Okay. Change the title of this guy. Alright. My dog is under me, and he likes to sit at my feet. Okay, so yesterday we started the Singleton pattern because we want to hook in our game to a client and server. And on the server, we want one instance of our game engine, our hive mind. So we used a pretty straightforward approach to that, where we made a static constructor, we made a static property that's backed by a, again, static field, so that whenever we access HiveMind, we'll be ensured to get the one instance that's been created for the application domain. And so in our case, the application domain is going to be the entire server. So we'll be assured that any request that comes in is going to happen chronologically and, so processed in order, so that when game events take place, like you attack somebody, they attack you, we don't get a bunch of out of order events. And that's all well and good. We're using this TCP project, which seems to work pretty well, and we're extending it using a strategy. Where we kind of ran into an issue was, inside of our game, the client anyway, in order to do all this stuff, we really tightly coupled our game engine to this project. So we're going through the refactoring effort of turning this into a fairly dumb client, right? So, for example, it has a reference to MUD core. Well, we don't want to ship all of our clients with a copy of the game engine. So I'm going to remove that. And you can see immediately a lot of things go red because now it has no idea what the game engine is or does, which is actually what we want. And when the lights went off yesterday, I kind of revisited what we were doing and cleaned up a little bit of the code just so we could really focus in on the Singleton pattern. So essentially, we had this command parser, which we used before. What we want to do is take all that command parser code and put it into the process strategy that we have on the server. So this way, our HiveMind code stays untouched. The HiveMind doesn't have to know anything about parsing strings. We leave that up to this parsing, this strategy. So I just kind of threw a lot of the code that was in this file into our process strategy. And to give you an idea of how this works, so we've got a TCP server that's listening. Then we got a TCP client that's sending. So the TCP client is going to pass up a request. That request is going to be received by our process strategy. Cool. And it's going to be the job of our process strategy to turn the string into a game request. Execute and return a game response. So this is essentially what we've done. We've taken this kind of modular, very simple TCP client and server, and we said your only job, client, is going to be to send this request, and then the only job of the server is going to be to process that and pass it to our Singleton hive mind. The other side of this is that the TCP server then sends a game response which is then handled by the render strategy and output. So it's more or less what we're doing right now. So if we look at our hive mind process strategy, and we'll change the name here in a second because it's already weird to look at. I did a few points of refactor. Like, I decided to send over this console request. So I created an object that's going to be passing in the player name and a command. And so the request comes in. We go ahead and cast that to a console request because we know what it's going to be. We go ahead and just peg or stem a variable here called game response we'll be using here in a second. And then I'm going to try to get the game response based off of the command and the player name. So far, so good. And if I come in and get game response, this is where I'm doing all the things that I would have done in the command parse on the client, but now the client doesn't know enough to handle any of this. So I say, if the player name is equal to null, then send back the game response of please log in. This is going to be part of the handshake we were talking about yesterday. We want the player to log in. Otherwise, and this is definitely a point of refactor, but otherwise, we're going to go to the hive mind, we're going to find what room this player is in, and then we're going to find the player itself based off the name that we were given. Then we're going to take the command and we're going to break it up into its arguments. And we'll have to do a little more here, but that's the basic idea. We want to then get the game action, right? So we get the game action based off of the first parameter. And then if the arguments are greater than 2, we just say, hey, the game action is none. But otherwise, we're good. We get the target in very much the same way that we got the player. So let's go ahead and make all this kind of look the same. Now we'll just use this up here. We'll say get player, we'll pass in the room and the player name. Okay. So in theory, this is going to work. In theory, if we can figure out a way to get a request to this processing strategy, we should get back a game response. So we're nearly there. The place we're going to spend a little bit of time is in looking at this handshake, where you're a new user, we're not going to deal with passwords or anything, but you've got a player name, and you want to be that player. So you're logging in, for lack of a better term. So we come back over to our program, and we're going to clean this up now, because we don't have any of this stuff anymore. We'll leave this just for reference for a few seconds. We don't really have a command parser, because I'm sure we're going to have some bugs. But from the TCP package, from our easy TCP, we do want to create a new client. We're listening on port 4000. We want to use this parse strategy and this render strategy. Okay. So we're reasonably sure that our server, our TCP server, has a strategy that can handle the console request when it comes in. So what our parse strategy needs to do is create a console request and send it out. So this is the parse strategy that we added to our client code instead of our easy TCP domain. And I also added inside of the easy TCP project for the parse strategy, I added a command prompt and a place for it to be called. But we'll step through that in just a second. So when we parse a command, we're going to create a new console request that includes the command and the player name. So one of the things that we're looking at in terms of the singleton is we had all this dependency on the hive mind in our client. We've gotten rid of that. And now when we're inside of our server, we don't have to pass in hive mind anywhere. We understand that we're on the server. We understand that there's this kind of omnipresent singleton called the hive mind. So whenever I do a hive mind.instance, it's going to be the only instance of hive mind that could ever exist. And we like that. It's where the singleton really shines. So it's not a great pattern for a lot of things where you'd want to use it. It becomes an anti-pattern. But when you can use it, it is really the star of the show. So, well, if the server's got the hive mind and it's the one thing that's allowed to exist, it probably makes sense that our client should have a singleton for the player. So once you log in and you load up your player, really that's going to be the only player that should exist for the entirety of that session. So let's go back into this guy. And let's just make sure that we're naming all of our things the same. So let's go ahead and create a new player domain. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm in common. Another point of refactor. I made a common project for anything that I want to share between tiers. So anything that I want to share with the client or anything else, but I don't want to have to pass in the entire core project and vice versa. So I actually want this to be here. Okay, so if I add a new item, let's just call it we'll call it player 1 after a little homage to the book Ready Player One.